And here we have part two with the Transkei Defense Force brush pattern uniform from the 70s, 80s, early 90s that the Transkei Defense Force used. What I didn't mention in the first part with the jacket is, at least according to the label, this is a 50-50 poly cotton blend, and it's non-ripstop, obviously, that being primarily an American feature, certainly not an African one, certainly not in the 1980s. The fabric is a pretty hard wearing fabric. It's not particularly heavy, but the jacket was a little heavier than what I would expect for guys having to wear out in the bush, at least during the day. So perhaps a lot of them wore the shirt and then put on the jacket at night when it got cooler. Um, the same issues that I just mentioned about the stitching with the buttons on the jacket are an issue here as well. I also had to re-sew the button, or not the buttons, the belt loops, excuse me, which were also a little bit loose for my liking, but they're also a heavier use area, so I just restitched the bottoms because the tops, unlike USBDUs, are not stitched onto the front of the fabric. They're actually stitched in between two pieces of fabric at the top and then sewn over before the bottom flap is then folded down and sewn on. Basic features are a covered 4-button front, very similar to the jacket. One interesting thing is the top is fastened by a button as opposed to like a snap or something like that, which sometimes you'll see in uniforms where there's a different type of closure at the top as opposed to at the bottom. At the bottom here, we will have, again, this red tape is a feature that I added, but these are drawstrings, again, like on the jacket, for cinching up the ankles, for either blousing or keep bugs out, what have you. It's a little hard to see here, but there is a reinforced section of material on the knees, and if we turn these over quickly, there's a reinforced seat on them as well. Fairly standard. Stitching is again double stitched, which is perfectly fine for durability standards, unlike the buttons. Going back to the belt loops real quick, you'll notice that they're very wide. I would say they're probably 3 inches or something like that. So they'll accommodate a web belt or similar sized belt, which you don't see on U.S. uniforms, obviously. And that's the basic features. I'm going to run into the pockets real quick. We've got these fairly standard slash pockets, which I could take or leave. They've got this interesting, almost gauzy material on the inside, though, which is interesting in that it's not color matched to the rest of the uniform. We've got 2 cargo pockets here. My forever enemy, the cargo pocket, because it doesn't like to lay properly. Interesting in that it is a single button closure with a beveled edge to the top flap. Also, the inside of the front is bellowed a little bit for some expansion, but they are, again, sewn up at this point, so it's not a full bellow. Another interesting feature is that bevel to the pocket, which you see on a lot of European uniforms. Again, this seems to be sort of a European thing. I'm not sure if it's just personal preference or what have you. Interestingly, the top flaps are not bar tacked. although the actual pockets are. So that's good. The bar tacking's not as dense and heavy duty as on American uniforms, but it seems like it would hold up. It is a military style bar tack versus a civilian one, which is good. Um, the other interesting feature is this open top pocket on the top or right hand of the thigh, which is interesting in that it's just got this single button, but it's open top, almost like the San Marco coveralls I reviewed recently. And this, from what I understand, was a pocket for a field dressing, which was obviously in a standardized spot, so everybody knew where it was and could get to it quickly. And this, again, if I'm remembering correctly, is also a holdover from the Rhodesian uniform, which had the same feature to it. That is pretty much the pants, and again, some of the stitching is a little goofy, but it's got some interesting features to it. This uniform, I've worn probably 5 or 6 times in the field. I don't get a whole lot of chance to use it unless I'm playing our fictitious Syrian SAS or some other goofy third world unit that would use something other than BDUs perhaps, or if I'm just playing a skirm and I want to play with something different. Sometimes I'll break them out. Uh, I like them a lot. I like the pattern. The fit's good. They're not super baggy. They're not super tight either. These are mediums. They fit me just fine as a 5'8" guy, and I've had no problems with them. With in terms of availability, they still do pop up on eBay, and I believe Trident has jackets and shirts left. I don't think they still have pants though. They may have a stock that they haven't put on eBay, um, and I don't know if they have some on their home site. But like I said, I've got 2 sets of these. I like them both. The one set I'm just gonna keep and not resew the buttons so it has its original stitching to it. But these that I use in the field, if you're okay doing a little bit of restitching buttons is not hard. You can do it by hand. And if you do, they're really unique uniforms. I like them. They make you stand out even from guys in tiger stripes or something like that. If somebody else on the field's running something a little bit different like that, you'll definitely stand out. You'll look different. But when you're on the field, you won't stand out like you're wearing ACU or something like that. If you can find them and you're willing to plunk down some cash for them and do a little bit of sewing, I would absolutely recommend them.